So.
First, we want to thank the Brooklyn Borough President for being with us today and taking the time and leading us in our borough. So, thank you, Eric. I just want to mention that we cannot stay for the whole program because this is a tiny little borough with a tiny number of people and many, many things to do. So when he splits, please don't take it that he doesn't love this subject and isn't involved. And I want to thank Tracy and Lucas for being here. And Dr. Timothy Houlihan from St. Francis is here. And when Eric goes, he's going to sit up here and join the conversation a little bit just to make sure everything goes smoothly. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Borough President Adams.
Thank you. And I have been, this is our first time meeting, but we've communicated by email and I've been following your story, and I'm just so excited about the work that you're doing in the borough and the initiative with Bellevue. And I actually think that what I'd like to do is just share very briefly my story because it echoes yours and my mother's as well. And I think that it will hopefully give some inspiration to folks who are thinking about vegan and some affirmation to folks who are vegan. I actually will be 52 years old in 2 weeks. And I hope that's a surprise, or else my book title doesn't mean anything. But I wrote it, thank you. But I wrote it with my mother, who is now 82. And my mother and I and one of my sisters became vegan 30 years ago. I went vegan when I was a sophomore in college. Well, it started when I was a sophomore in college. I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, and our Black Student Union brought Dick Gregory to campus to talk about the state of Black America. Instead, he talked about the plate of Black America and how unhealthfully most folks eat. And he traced the path of a hamburger from a cow on a factory farm through the slaughterhouse process to a fast food restaurant, to a clogged artery, to a heart attack. And I'd never heard anything like that before. I absolutely hated vegetables growing up. It was a struggle for my mom to get me to eat them. And my freshman year, I gained 25 pounds. So I was on a whole other trajectory. And Dick Gregory changed my life. So I immediately went vegan. It lasted for a week, and I thought he was crazy. But I told my mom and my sister about his talk, and when I went home for the summer, I read everything that I could about vegetarianism because I couldn't get what he said out of my mind. And by the end of the summer, 1986, my mom decided, who was in her 50s at the time, and my sister, who was a senior at Tufts University, we decided to all go vegetarian. I took my entire junior year away. I went to Nairobi, Kenya for the first semester, where I was not able to be vegetarian, but I had 2 experiences on safari for 2 weeks, where I was up close and personal with animals in their own domain, in their world, watching them and observing them on safari, but also watching them be killed. And that made me know when I returned home that I would never eat another animal. So the next semester I came back to Washington, D.C., went to Howard University, and it was there that in D.C., and it was there that I discovered that there was a large and thriving Black vegan and vegetarian community in Washington, D.C. that had started the very first 100% vegan restaurants in the nation's capital, beginning in 1982. And in fact, a vegan food truck was at Howard University from at least 1975 on. So there were 12 vegan establishments, all Black owned, in Washington, D.C. during that period. And so I immersed myself in this community. My mother immersed herself. We went to, and you know, this is 10 years before we had access to the internet. So you physically had to go and hear lectures. You physically had to go and take classes and go to the library and read books. And that's what we did. And so within that semester and that summer, I went back to college and was a confident and committed vegetarian, but I couldn't let go of cheese. So I spent my senior year at Amherst cooking for myself. There was no Whole Foods on the East Coast, so I got on the bus and went to Bread and Circus once a week, cooked my vegetarian food in the basement of Charles Drew House where I lived, and covered my plate and carried it over across campus to the cafeteria twice a day, every day for a year to eat with my friends. But I knew what I was doing, and I knew why I was doing it, and I was the only vegetarian I knew on campus, and it was a struggle. But I had this community in DC that taught me what I was doing, how to make it affordable, how to make it delicious, why I was doing it. So that year, I basically decided that I was going to let go of cheese. And for me to do that, and this may be inspiration for others of you who are struggling with that, I had to read over and over about how unhealthy it is and the cruelty involved in producing it, until finally it clicked, and the momentary pleasure of a piece of cheese in my mouth wasn't worth the health risk or the cruelty involved in producing it. And so by the end of my senior year, I became a full vegan. So that was 1988. So it has been 30 years. And from there, I eventually decided to make this my profession, come to New York University, get a master's degree in public health nutrition. But before that, in 1996, my sister and I started one of the first vegan websites ever, blackvegetarians.com, and it was the first Black vegan website ever. And we've been doing this work together for all of these years. And I taught, directed one of the first vegan nutrition programs in DC, the first federally funded vegan nutrition program in the country. Started the African American Vegan Starter Guide, and we now have 500,000 free printed copies of that guide in distribution. You can get it online. It's free, AfricanAmericanVeganStarterGuide.com. I wrote a book in 2010 called By Any Means Necessary, and this book, Ageless Vegan Now, we're on book tour for it, and I wrote it with my mother because I wanted people to hear the perspective of a Black woman who decided to become vegan in her 50s from South Carolina, who changed the paradigm in her entire family. She is the only one of 14 siblings who of those who survived into their senior years. She's the only one that does not have chronic disease. And both her parents died of chronic disease before I was born. So her being vegan and exercising 6 days a week, twice a day, doing yoga and Pilates and weight training and aerobics, has sustained her and allowed her to be 82, healthy, fit, and active. And so this is the work that I've been doing for the last 25 to 30 years, teaching people how and why to go vegan. So that's my story, and I'm done.
and it's a powerful story. Can you, that cheese connection,
yeah.
Can you talk about, before we get to Lucas, the challenge and the addictive qualities of cheese and how hard it was to wean yourself off it?
Yes, I mean, cheese, not only is it the #1 source of saturated fat in the American diet, but it also is addictive. Dr. Neil Barnard has written a book about, I don't remember the name of it, but about the
prevent and reverse diabetes.
That's the one about cheese, where he talks about how addictive it is. And there's the casein in cheese. That is like sugar in your body. Sugar is the #1 addictive substance. Cheese is in the top 3 because of this property in cheese. I think it's casein, but I may be wrong. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Is that what it is? It's the casein in cheese. Thank you. So it is not your fault that you are addicted to cheese, that is difficult to let go of cheese. And for me, I think the important thing is to understand the process. It is not benign. To produce cheese involves cruelty to animals. To get the milk, to the factory farming that's involved, the process of getting meat, the process of getting dairy, it is very cruel, it is unnecessary, and we don't need it to be healthy and to thrive. So if you understand that it's addictive, and you decide that you are going to let it go, then you work backwards from there, as I did. Now, I can sit in a pizza parlor with my friends who are still omnivores, and it still smells good, it still looks good. It doesn't repulse me like meat does, but I understand that it's unhealthy and it's cruel, and so reading that over and over for an entire year is what made it click for me, and that might help you.
Excellent. Lucas, tell us about your book and this journey.
Sure. Wow, I'm very inspired by both your stories. That was, I'm not vegan, and I described myself when I was emailing with the organizers of this panel as an old-fashioned vegetarian, but just because, but I'm constantly I work also as an editor and working on a story that compares, or that looks at the overlap of LGBT rights with animal rights. And it's a really fascinating comparison when you factor in social justice and environment. It's a big part of the big picture. And then I was also working on a story with a doctor who he got his MD, and then he decided to go get a degree from the Natural Gourmet Institute, which is one of the long-standing plant-based culinary program. And one of the driving forces for that was that in medical school, nutrition is a very, very small part of the education. So a lot of these doctors, and their pharmaceutical industry and sort of the system as it is right now, really pushes for prescriptions rather than teaching you how to eat properly and use food as your medicine. And so that seems to be something that's changing, and it's really exciting to see it changing on an institutional level. So I grew up in Idaho, eating meatloaf and boxed scalloped potatoes and iceberg salads, and it wasn't until college, and I wasn't even propelled by, I didn't have an awakening about animal rights. It was something that I just felt like doing when I got to college, to stop eating meat. I went to the cafeteria, ate a lot of rice with a lot of soy sauce on it, and then as I worked in a bakery growing up, and then I started working as a line cook here in New York when I was going to school at Hunter, and I just got really excited about the cooking. And for me, vegetarianism has always been what makes me feel good. It's always been a really affordable way to eat well, and it's been very inspiring for me as a cook. So that's always been what's guided my books. My first book was about veggie burgers, every kind of veggie burger you can imagine. My second book was about vegetarian entrees, that's sort of solving the problem of what to replace the hunk of animal protein. And my third book, as I was saying, explored bowls. But for me, it's always just been very, I've always been very inspired by vegetables. I've been inspired by going to the farmer's market. I enjoy the variety. I enjoy, a salad is still my favorite thing to eat. So it's very much about the pleasure. And I enjoy really learning how it fits into this bigger picture of how we can all lead healthier lives, and how we can make a better world for everybody.
Could you both talk about the affordability? We often hear that to eat vegetarianism or veganism is too expensive. Can you talk about the affordability of it?
Well, I can't imagine. How is it? That doesn't make sense to me unless you're only buying like sort of highly processed, expensive foods. But if you're buying vegetables and beans and tofu and grains, it can't be nearly as expensive as buying meat.
Right, and that's one of the issues that people always say, well, it's expensive, and it's true. If you are buying primarily packaged foods and vegan versions of meat and dairy, those tend to be more expensive. But if you are eating a whole food, plant-based diet, and your ingredients are whole grains, beans, nuts, and fresh fruits and vegetables, or frozen fruits and vegetables, and you're using dried herbs and spices and flour and perhaps some oil. You don't have to use oil, it's not necessary, but if you are getting all of those things from the bulk bin first, or the farmer's market, your local grocery store, if you're using these whole food plant-based ingredients, then it actually can be less expensive than eating primarily highly processed packaged food diet as an omnivore.
one of the most surprising aspects of this journey, each day, each week I read up on one spice and the power of the spice. Can you talk about the spice aspect of it? Because sometimes we think the spices are just good because they taste good, but I was amazed to find out the power of all the spices and what they actually do. And if you could explore that a little.
I actually want to share with you that we have a chapter in this book called Superfoods, and these are common superfoods that include dried herbs and spices, and we share it because we're talking about how they can promote health and longevity. And so some of the spices thank you. Okay. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. So we talk about rosemary. We talk about thyme. Oh, goodness. Hold on. Here we go. I found it. All right. Rosemary has been shown to improve memory and brain function. Saffron, which is actually an expensive spice, but you can use saffron has been shown to diminish the cognition impairing effects of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Turmeric, which is not as expensive as saffron, turmeric has been shown to help prevent Alzheimer's disease or reduce its symptoms among its many other health benefits. And it has such a powerful effect in prevention and treatment of a wide range of health conditions that Dr. Michael Greger from How Not to Die, who I've known for 20 years, fantastic person, excellent book, nutritionfacts.org website, one of the best online, recommends consuming a teaspoon of turmeric each day, which I do. A teaspoon of turmeric with a dash of pepper, incredibly helpful for you. So there are others that I listed here as well. I want to mention also blueberries and strawberries. Studies have shown that when you eat dark berries like blueberries and strawberries and blackberries on a regular basis, about 1.5 cups a week, that you can also improve and maintain your cognitive functioning as you get older. And it has been shown in studies on women that it can help to improve their cognitive function by 2.5 years. It help it to maintain by 2.5 years as compared to women, the cognitive function of women who don't eat berries on a regular basis. So you want to eat berries, you want to eat spices. They have so many health properties that we have yet to discover.
I'm curious, one thing that when I read these scientific studies, I'm always overwhelmed. Like a lot of my friends, for example, are doing keto diets or paleo diets, and they seem to be drawing from a completely different body of research or pulling different aspects of the same research. And then I read like Dr. Esselstyn or the Forks Over Knives and the NG2 diet and stuff. It's making kind of a very different argument from what's made over in this space. How do you go about like processing all of the data and all of the science, making sense of it?
Good question.
Right, and so I think that for me, one of the most important things is that I have a grounding in it. Having gone to NYU and getting a master's degree in public health nutrition, so understanding about who is funding certain studies, and but generally you look at the cumulative evidence, right? You look at the cumulative evidence and research that has been done over a period of years, over a period of decades. If it's available, you read meta-analyses. And you actually don't have to read that. You can go to nutritionfacts.org, and Dr. Michael Greger has done that for you. And so it's a free website. It's one of the best nutrition websites on the planet, and he keeps up with the latest nutrition studies that deal with health and nutrition. And so I highly recommend that one. that website in particular to stay up to date. But I mean, we know that the healthiest foods to eat are whole plant-based foods. That's only disputed by the meat and dairy industry.
That's something I always come. Oh, I'm sorry. What I always come back to is that it just feels so logical. The right foods to eat.
Yeah.
It's the things that make you feel good when you look around, and how each food sort of fits into the bigger picture of the world. I feel like we all know what's healthy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of noise that's trying to complicate that.
Right.
And I think that looking at the website by Dr. Greger, it's an amazing website. That was my starting point, because you're right, Lucas. There's just so much information, and you're inundated with so much information, and it's difficult really to define, okay, I'm hearing all of these different stories, what's right? And Dr. Greger, for those of you who don't know him, he was here at Borough Hall, and he did a lecture here, and the way he has utilized his time, he charges for none of his information, and he really digs into the research. And really, this stuff is really in plain view. It's not hidden. But we're inundated with just information from the pharmaceutical industry, information from the meat and dairy industry that really doesn't allow this information to come out and show people how transitioning off this, American diet really can impact their health. And so I think we look at what you did with your mom. My mom is, like I said, she was 80 when she started this journey, and it's unimaginable that 57 years she was on high blood pressure medicine. And she was on insulin for 7 and diabetes medicine, 4 medicines for 15 years. And to go 2 months and get off of insulin, if that was a pill, every doctor would be prescribing it.
Right.
But what's really fascinating about this journey is that none of our medical schools really embrace the philosophy of disease reversal. Only 25% of the medical schools in this country will teach one course on nutrition. The other courses are on how to treat the symptoms of diseases, and we're trying to change that at downstate that produce a lot of our nurses and doctors in the tri-state area. We are really partnering with our hospitals, because when I gave my doctor the book, How Not to Die, she called me late at night and she says, I never read this before. And many of you who are starting this journey, because I know all of us know someone who's dealing with a chronic disease. All of us. And when you have a chronic disease, it hijacks your life. You're no longer who you are. It impacts your entire family, not only the person who's going through it, but also the caregiver. It is just an empowering and a powerful time in your life. And to be able to reverse that, do you know how I feel? My mother has 6 children. She loves them all, but she adores me. I'm her favorite child. And to be able to take my mother off insulin. Can you imagine that? And that's what these great books are doing, because she had to adjust her palate to get off that Southern diet, the addictive behavior of sugar, fat, salt, and oil. And to be able to change that, I needed your books to show her, hey mom, listen, here's some foods you can eat. And she's just a different person. So my sister has breast cancer. My other sister lost her kidney. My brothers, one of them is pre-diabetic, the other is diabetic, and also have prostate issues. Mother now has become this symbol for the family, because they're saying, wait a minute, mommy can do it at 80, then I can do it. And now we're changing, the family's changing their whole mindset, because you need to support. Just like a person who's addicted to alcohol, a person who's addicted to drugs, this is the same addictive qualities. And if you don't have that support, if you are sitting at your table trying to eat a sustainable diet and people are not doing the same, it's sort of difficult. And if you want to get someone angry, tell them you're eating a whole food plant-based diet. People get so angry at you, and they want to wave a steak in your face and say, don't you miss this? Yes, you do. But just as an alcoholic misses alcohol, just as a drug user misses drugs, we're in recovery. Every day of my life, I'm in recovery from being addicted to the American diet, but I want to live long enough and enjoy my grandchildren, and I want my mother to be here to enjoy her great-grandchildren as well. That's why we're doing it, and that's why we're living this lifestyle, and these books helps us do it.
I want to just amen that and say that the transition can be challenging. How many of you are already vegan? How many of you are vegetarian? How many of you are on the path to going vegan and vegetarian? Okay. And how many of you are just here because somebody dragged you and said you need to be here today? Nobody? Oh, one. Okay. We're glad you're here. Excellent. So I just want to tell you that I want to amen what Eric Adams is saying, because the transition can be challenging, right? It can be really difficult to let go of sugar. My mother was addicted to sugar. She was thin and still went to Overeaters Anonymous because she was addicted to sugar. So there is a lot that goes on in the transition, but considering a bridge, right? You have to get over the bridge, and once you cross the bridge and you're on the other side, believe me, as a person who has been vegan for 30 years, it gets easier very quickly, to the point where it becomes natural and beautifully effortless. The only reason I think about being vegan is because it's my profession. If it wasn't, I'd be cruising and coasting. I travel all over the world, just for leisure, sometimes for work, and I've been doing it as a vegan for 30 years. It is not difficult, y'all, so you just get through the transition process to the other side, and it gets easier and effortless as you go.
So true, so true.
And that part, being able to include your family in that journey seems like a really important one. I was just reading a statistic about one of the primary reasons that vegans relapse is that it's socially alienating. And so being able to like change your table together might help the journey.
That's so true. And if someone would have told me today I would be a vegan, I would have told them, are you out of your mind? Really. And just the thought about how different your body feels after, the bloating, the constipation, the lethargic feeling in the morning, the unclear thoughts, and we don't connect it to the food we're eating. You look at Ken Thompson, our first African-American district attorney. He died from colorectal cancer. That is the lack of fiber in your diet. And I think the most important thing that we need to embrace is that we don't get diseases because they're hereditary. 5% of our diseases come from our DNA. 95% are genes that we turn on and off based on the food that we eat. Those genes do not turn on to cause these diseases if you're not giving them the poison or the food they need to turn them on. And so that's important to acknowledge. Can you explore for a moment traveling? Because when I travel a lot, and when I travel, I bring with me a small hot pot and some dry foods, to make my meals in my hotel room, because it is almost impossible to find good food for the most part on the road sometimes. So can you talk about, your books and how into some traveling aspects of it?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I love to talk about this topic, so I know I'm talking a lot.
No, you're not.
But yeah, so for traveling, I usually bring food with me so that, depending on where I'm going, last year I went to Tokyo for my birthday this time last year, 14-hour flight. I did a video on my Facebook page by Any Greens Necessary showing everything that I was taking on my trip. So I took peanut butter, I took almond butter and jelly sandwiches, I took crackers, I took dates, I took nuts. I actually ordered the vegan food that was available on the flight just in case I wanted to try it, and that's an option now depending on which section you're traveling in. But absolutely, you can do it. You have to bring sometimes your own food, especially on these long distance flights, but you just do it. And most airports are not going to have places that are vegan, right? But you can find vegan options at Starbucks or other places. I'm not promoting Starbucks, but in a pinch, you can get some vegan food or food bars, nuts, fresh fruit, that kind of thing. But I always bring my food with me. In my hotel that I'm staying in for this festival, I brought fresh fruit and nuts and oats. And I just went downstairs and, put some hot water and some chopped apples in it. So I am always doing this because when I started, there were fewer options available. So it's just a natural part of what you do if you need to. So you can definitely travel all over the world on a long flight and just bring your food. And they do allow you to take it through through the airport.
I think even if you're just a picky eater, you get very accustomed to bringing food with you when you travel,
Yeah.
as I do.
And I think that the power of going to restaurants, eat out a lot, and being able to look at the menu, because there's the art of going through the menu, and so you don't have to be antisocial as you make this transformation, and looking at just the appetizers and putting together a meal of picking the different items on the appetizers, the broccoli, the kale, and creating your own dish. So that oftentimes when I make a dish and put together a dish, people say, wait a minute, that looks better than what I'm ordering. So there's a lot of power in just being creative and not feeling as though, okay, I'm a vegan, I can't sit down with my friends and socialize with them. Just about every restaurant, you can look at the appetizers menu and you can put together a beautiful plate when you do so.
You absolutely can. And I will say also, in New York, my goodness, you can eat out. There are hundreds of vegan and vegetarian restaurants here. So it's really a non-issue in terms of eating out here, different price levels, different types of food. But my oldest sister is not vegan. And she's extremely supportive. It's just not something that she wants to do. And so over these 30 years, we're a very close family. We do everything together, celebrate occasions. And so with her and with my sister and my two oldest nieces, we would go to steakhouses or a Cheesecake Factory or TGIFs and things like that. And I just wouldn't, my mother, my middle sister Maria and I, we just wouldn't eat at those places. But it was important for us to be there, right? So we would either eat before or eat after. But there are some vegans who will, eat the food. I just don't. That's just not something that I want to do. But there definitely vegan options. But the most important thing to me is to be there with your friends and family. And if for whatever reason you choose not to eat, you eat before or after, or you order something there or not. Be with your family members, be with your friends. If you should not wait. And I hate to use the word should. I encourage you not to wait. If social isolation is an issue for you, if family isolation is an issue, I encourage you not to let that be a hindrance. If I had waited, I would still be waiting, right? I would not have experienced the health benefits of being vegan for my entire adult life. My mother being vegan from 50 to 80. So we had each other as support. We had this Black vegan community for support. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't decided that I was going to do it. So, the universe brings things to you, and you can find community and support online and in person, but it's crucial. But don't socially isolate yourself. Food is important, but so are people. So just show up and be there anyway.
So if quick start tips to start for those who want to look at something like this, you should really pick up these two great books. But try, with a theme that has really resonated throughout the entire country of Meatless Mondays. Just pick a day of the week and say, you know what, I'm going to try to go without meat for this day and get the family used to it. This is definitely not your mom and dad's veganism. The food out there is amazing. Go online and do a Google search. Look at these great books, and you'll find that there's just some amazing meals out there that even your children will enjoy. And it's just a great way of incorporating a healthy lifestyle in your family. I have a quick quiz. 47% of us are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. 3, I'm going to ask you, what do you believe is the cause of diabetes? How many would say sugar? Just raise your hand. How many would say overconsumption of carbohydrates? How many would say saturated fat? Saturated fat. The number 1 cause of diabetes is saturated fat, and the highest consumption of saturated fat is in meat. You know, all of that, well, you know what, I eat only a breast chicken. By the time you get that chicken to your plate, it is definitely not the chicken that was running around the barn. It is by the time you get that steak, that overconsumption of saturated fat. So as long as you are consuming saturated fat in your life, you're going to continue to have a problem with diabetes, and it's going to continue to impact you no matter how much medicine you take. Medicine does not reverse the disease. It treats the symptoms. It covers the symptoms up. And you will still go down that slippery path that can lead to amputation, blindness, kidney failure, heart disease, and the entire package that comes with it. So I have to sneak off. And, you know, but we're gonna wrap. We're gonna finish up with our 2 great authors. If you have not picked up their books, I hope your books are here on the table somewhere. Please look at their books. It's an amazing book. Both these books are amazing. If you want to start out and really look at some of the dishes that they make. I love the bowl. I was looking at your book. These are some great books and some great ways to transition into whole food, plant-based or vegetarian diet. The more we move from processed food and meat consumption, the healthier we will become. I'm gonna have my guy too.
As we transition, can we take a picture with you? Yeah, thank you. All 3 of us, yeah. And if we can...
Any questions? Well, let's take it after. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for being here. I was interested in finding out, looking at my video, who had any insights around the role of mindfulness strategies. We are using mindfulness in the New York City Department of Education as a holistic approach for all of our kids and all of our adults. But I'd like to hear what our experts might have to say, what our president might have to say about mindfulness and what you'd like to do about that in New York City.
I believe it's so important that we start developing the full personhood of our children, and not only want them to be academically sound, but we want them to be emotionally intelligent. We must start our days with meditation. We must start our days with positive affirmation. By the time our babies get in school, many of them are broken. They are in pain. Many of them went through unbelievable hurdles to get there. They're in family environments that are dealing with some very tragic aspects of life. They're trying to adjust and wrap their head around a person in Washington that sends out horrific tweets every morning to start them off being afraid and intimidated. So it's not only about how we're feeding our children nutritionally, but how we're feeding them emotionally. And we want our children now to really embrace the concept of the oneness. We are all one. We come from one universal energy, and our children need to tap into that. And mindfulness allows them to do that. Yoga, meditation, a healthy lifestyle, appreciate animals, using some of our schoolyards as places where they can raise chickens and other animals, using our rooftops for aquaponics and hydroponics so they can grow their food. That's what we want to do here in the borough of Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the center of the universe, so we want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Amen to what Eric has said, and I think that children at any age, they are receptive and open, so it's fantastic, it's fabulous that you are teaching mindfulness in the schools. And I think one of my mantras is liberate your mind and your mouth will follow. And so I really believe that it starts with your mind, you deciding that you want to be healthy, And children can make that decision. Children can make the decision that they want to eat various types of food, and one of those choices can be healthier, delicious food. So that's what I would say. I think it's fantastic, and more power to you in the program that you're doing.
I don't have.
Again, thank you so much. Thank you.